Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Acting Administrator Nolan, for being here. While I look forward to hearing from you, I have to say I'm disappointed by the absence of a Senate-confirmed witness like Secretary Buttigieg, who ultimately oversees the agency responsible for the NOTAM failure. And I would note that Secretary Buttigieg, in my view, instead of engaging in politics, should be focused on the job he has now and addressing the very serious transportation crises we are seeing playing out across the country. On the afternoon of January 10th, the FAA's Notice to Air Mission system failed. About 15 hours later, after failing to reboot the system, the FAA ordered a full ground stop of the National Airspace System for the first time since September 11th, 22 years ago. The ground stop was because America was under attack. But this time, this ground stop was the result of the federal agency's inability to modernize, despite Congress providing the required resources to do so. The Washington Post called the ground stop, quote, almost unprecedented, and said the FAA, quote, learned long ago their systems were dependent on rickety foundations, but didn't do enough to update technology. Despite a similar outage in 2008, the FAA still has not improved the system. A technology specialist involved in the 2008 outage blamed, quote, organizational inertia, something I've heard many times before when people describe problems at the FAA. The Wall Street Journal said, quote, given the importance of the FAA's mission, this kind of failure is hard to excuse. If glitches happen all the time, why doesn't the FAA have redundancy? Canada's NOTAM system, operated by a nonprofit, experienced apparently unrelated problems the same day as the United States, but planes there kept flying. The NOTAM breakdown last month was clearly a mistake. I fear it is emblematic of a culture afraid to innovate, stuck operating inefficiently, and illustrative of why President Biden needs to choose an administrator for the FAA with a proven ability to manage change within large organizations and with the requisite aviation and safety experience. The current nominee that is pending lacks that aviation experience. The FAA's safety mission, Mr. Nolan, as you know well, is too important to take for granted. There's a front page story in the Wall Street Journal today on the FAA's inability to modernize NOTAM. In that story, an FAA spokesperson claims that prioritizing NOTAM upgrades wouldn't guarantee funding from Congress. That's simply not true. Congress has fully funded NOTAM modernization for more than 10 years. Every year since 2013, Congress has given as much or more than the amount requested by the executive agency for 10 years now. And yet, full modernization is still several years away. After investing millions of dollars, I'm wondering why this bureaucracy is taking so long to do its job. And is the system worth modernizing at this point? Because the status quo simply isn't acceptable. There must be accountability when an agency is not using taxpayer funds efficiently, and that, of course, starts with an accountable leader. Now in his third year as Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Buttigieg has failed to deliver any meaningful reform at the FAA. Although NOTAM modernization started a decade ago, this administration seems focused on semantics. Whether it's replacing the term mother with birthing person, or creating a new checkbox on passports for people who claim to be neither a man nor woman, this administration's desire to signal its virtue seems to know no limits. It's even infected the FAA. Instead of it focusing on safety, the FAA and DOT were working hard to change NOTAM's name from Notice to Airmen to Notice to Air Missions. I would suggest instead the focus should have been on making sure the damn thing worked. Shockingly, renaming NOTAM didn't prevent an outage. Way back in 1994, Al Gore proposed to reform the FAA into a self-funding, more efficient organization. Today, the flying public is stuck with a self-regulating and flailing agency stuck in the 20th century. It is my hope that we can use this hearing and the 2023 FAA reauthorization bill to explore meaningful reforms to the FAA and its air traffic organization. And let me say finally, in recent weeks, we've seen several very concerning near misses that were almost mass fatality crashes. We've seen them in New York. We've seen them in Austin, Texas. We just recently saw one outside of Hawaii. I know Texans and Americans across this country are deeply concerned about these near misses, and I hope in addition to addressing the failure of the NOTAM system that Mr. Nolan, you will also address these near misses, why they almost killed hundreds of people, and what more can be done to make sure that the next near miss doesn't become a horrific tragedy. Thank you.